Hey everyone, this is a little bit of a podcast that myself and Raphael, who you can see on the screen right now, decided to put together.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands, essential jazz hands. So yeah, I mean, how long has it been since we've been talking about doing this now? It's been a while, hasn't it?
It's got to be at least 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the whole bubble thing blew it up. We were sort of all ready to go, weren't we? And then all of a sudden that started. But we will talk about that in a little bit. Now, his name's Raphael, obviously. You can see his name right in the corner there. But I'll call him Raph because those two extra syllables just
throw you too much for your
brain. Be bothered with those, you know? So
soon you start to call me R.
Right, that's a good one. There's lots of people still call me G. You're like, you lazy bugger, you know? But that's swearing. I'm sorry. I'm sure the algorithm will ignore that one. But Raf has done some tutorials on the channel, and which were excellent and were very, very well received. And we've been sort of, it must be coming up to 12 months now that we've been sort of chatting and various different things about no code. So I think what's useful about this, the reason that sort of we thought this would be good for the two of us to do it, is that I'm a coder by trade with many too long experience. I won't tell you how long I've been at it, otherwise you'll guess my age. But put it this way, yeah, the early 90s was kind of when I was in my pomp, just to give you some idea. And Rafi's not a technical guy. Rafi's not a coder. He's coming to no code as like a technical founder, as they say. So that's why I thought that Raf would be useful to give both our perspectives, a techie and a non-techie. So Raf, do you want to just sort of go ahead and just tell us about how you got started with all this lot?
Yeah, sure. So kind of my journey began. So with my wife, I ran a sports company. So we had been looking for a solution to kind of run all of our back-end office operations. And we had been doing, up to that point, everything on Google Sheets, but we'd grown to the point where it was getting really difficult to manage. So I discovered this via Udemy. I discovered this platform called FileMaker, and I've literally found a Udemy course that taught you how to build an attendance management app. And I basically reverse engineered the whole thing, added a few bells and whistles, and I was like, here we go. I've just created my first MVP, you know? So we kind of did that for quite a few years, actually. And it was like sufficient for our purposes. But as we got to the point where the company was growing and we needed to add additional functionality, we found that the platform, the whole FileMaker thing, quite restrictive just because of the licensing restrictions. So I needed to find another solution. So at that point in time, we contacted several companies, software development companies, and I kind of pitched the idea of what I wanted to build. One of the significant differences was I wanted to make it a multi-tenant SaaS app because we wanted to make it available to other people in our sector. And in addition to that, I wanted to add, additional functionality like payment processing. I'd already built email functionality in, but just kind of like adding all these other bits and pieces. So I got a quote back from several companies, and they ranged from between £200,000 to £250,000 for the MVP, with a team of 6 people working on it. And it would take about 12 to 18 months to get to that stage. At which point I politely said, thank you very much for your time. And realized that if I was going to do this, there had to be another way to do it. Yeah. And that's what I then just cut. I remember I'd stumbled on no code before, but I hadn't really, taken any interest in it just because we had something that was working. But that's when I kind of then went looking again through the whole no code space, and I came across coaching no code apps, which was, I think, Gabby and Kristen's.
Gabby, yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up kind of having an initial call with them, rediscovered Bubble. I kind of heard about it a few years back, but like I said, it wasn't really on my radar. Went into that and thought, okay, cool, this could be a great way to, to something to explore anyway. So that's what I did. And this was about maybe just before I met you, actually, because I think I'd been doing it from maybe the May, June of last year. But then I kind of sign up to their program where they kind of have like a 12-week program. They walk through, how you come up with your concept, how you develop the database structure, and did that. It was absolutely fantastic, a really, really, really great program. And it was, I think, whilst I was trying to solve some issues on there, I found you on the Bubble forum. I thought, oh, this guy sounds nice. And no, it was your videos
Videos,
yeah, you had done you were building out some stuff on your in your tutorials on YouTube, and I remember some of the functionality, and I was like, I need to add that to my app, so I need to watch this stuff. And so I was watching your stuff, applying it to my app at the same time as doing this program. And then I think I reached out to you one time and said, "Oh, you're just fantastic. You're just amazing. Like, can I be a fanboy?"
Yeah, well, I'm a sucker for flattery.
You are. You took the bait.
Because you said to me, amazing. You responded. You were so nice to me in the message, so absolutely syrupy nice. I had to get back to you, like, you know.
You feel obligated.
It was all good fun, yeah. So, I mean, at what point did you kind of request? Because FileMaker's been around for donkey's years. At what point did you realize that this was something that was a bit like FileMaker, that you could do it yourself? At what point kind of did the light bulb go off on that one?
I think pretty much initially. I think once I realized we're not going to use FileMaker, and once I had those quotes come back from the development companies, I realized there has to be another way to do it. In that time, Bubble had really kind of grown, because I think it was like a 4 or 5 year period. So it's like, okay, it looks like I can do everything in here that I basically did on FileMaker. And after having that initial consultation call with Gabby, she was like, yeah, all the additional stuff I want to do is all doable, you know, in Bubble, using APIs and backend workflows and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, cool, this is it. So I pretty much made up my mind straight away. I did look at some of the other alternatives out there as well. Because I need to do a native mobile app as well. So I looked at, I think Glide, I looked at Adalo, and there's a few other like Bubble kind of competitors that I looked at as well. But this one seemed to be the one that I could kind of, firstly, I had a great community, a lot of resources out there, even on YouTube, so I could get a real feel for what it's capable of doing. By signing up to Gabby's program and stuff, that just kind of, you know, laid out the pathway for me, which was brilliant. Right.
Okay. It's interesting stuff. I mean, the way that I got into Bubble was I've got a little software business, and I've been running that for about 10 years, and it was kind of sat on legacy tech, and it was getting to the point I couldn't really do it much more with it, and I needed to, it wasn't really a cloud solution, more like a desktop, like a client server desktop solution, and I put it on the cloud in terms of people could use it, like as through terminal services and stuff, you know, like Citrix type of thing. But I really needed like a native sort of cloud web-based system. And the trouble, what was happening, and anyone who's been in development maybe over the last 5 or 6 years, much longer than that actually, is that things have changed so quick. And I knew that when I was going to rewrite this thing, it was going to take me at least a couple of years, because I'm running my business and everything else and trying to write this. And I kept I had 6 or 7 false starts with this thing, purely because everything was changing. Like there was a framework out there called Angular, which then got changed, and I won't bore everybody with it, but it was to the point, in fact, there's a term in JavaScript in development, which is JavaScript fatigue, because there seems to be something new every 5 minutes. Now, I've stabilized a little bit, but then I got word that I hadn't heard of no code or low code. I hadn't heard anything like that, but I had heard that a major software company in the UK that are global, but I do compete with, I mean, like, I'm not even like a gnat on their back, you know, like I'm the parasite on the back of the gnat that's on the back of on their back, you know. But still, I did come up against them, and they developed this big enterprise system, and there was a big thing. They'd done it in 6 months with a team of like 5 people, which was just unheard of. Not at the level I might like, a much higher level enterprise system, and they'd done it in what they call low code, and actually it was Salesforce that they'd done it on. They've since, because this is such a huge company, they didn't want to piggyback onto another company, enterprise company system. They've since discontinued the app, but at the time it was there. And so I thought, well, this is something I can get into. And I looked at, there was Salesforce, but didn't feel right. And then there was a thing called Zoho Creator that I looked at, but
Zoho I looked at as well.
Yeah, but it seemed to, again, I came up against them in what I was doing, so I didn't want to give the competitor and then I kept doing it, and then I remember typing in low code, and this thing came up, no code. And, you know, like, I mean, I'm a code, it's like, no code. Oh, wow. Come on. I can get low code. I can get that, like you draw your things out and whatever, but no code, come on. And everything that came up with no code was bubble all the time. And it took me a while to actually believe it, to get over my skepticism. But when I did, I remember because I remember thinking to myself, if this is a thing, if this is real, then this is going to give me such a competitive advantage. It's going to be frightening. I can't just dismiss it. I could be missing the biggest shift in software development that's certainly in my career, and there has been many shifts in my career. I just thought this could be it. And so I said, right, I'm going to sit down for a week, and at the end of that week, I'm going to make a decision. And like within like the first day, like I had like the core of like a financial engine sort of churning out numbers. And this, I remember showing my wife, I said, I've just knocked this together in like half a day. That would have took me weeks, potentially months to do in code. And that was it. That was kind of, that was my crossing the Rubicon moment, shall we say. And then since I've just been in love with it, you know, it's if only this would have come along 20 years ago, you know. I mean, somebody was asking advice on Twitter a few weeks ago, saying, should I learn how to code? And I said, if you want to be a programmer, learn how to code. If you want a business, learn no code. It's as simple as that. If you want to be a software developer, a coder, go learn that. But if you're an entrepreneur, even if you've got coding experience, no code is where, obviously no code can't do everything. I suppose the kind of apps I'm talking about are like line of business apps, like yours is, like the type of things that I build are. So you don't need code for that anymore. It's defunct, really, you know. So obviously you need code for the serious stuff, for the lower level stuff, but for, you know, line of business, operational type business apps, you know, you can do it all in no code these days.
And other than like the speed of execution, you know, being able to go from concept through to actually having something that's working and function, what was it about Bubble that really kind of like blew your mind?
Just that you could do it. It's just, you know, it was like, because you got to understand, like, I've been, you know, I am an old guy. I'm now in my early 50s. I've been doing this professionally. You know, I started my first software company back in '92. So I've been doing this a long time, and I was extremely jaded. Every idea that you came up with, you know, and software development becomes so, it got to the point where, like, as a one-person developer, can I do this anymore? Is this now still open to me? Because the bar was set so high, and the amount of time it would take and everything. So it was to actually find a way that this was possible now. Because back in the day, one person could do it. Even 10 years ago in code, one person could. And I suppose you still can. But maybe when you're a bit of an old goat like myself, who's been at it a long time, and you're just sick of every idea you get, you think, what a great idea. That's going to take me 3 months. Like, what a great idea. That's going to take me 6 months. And all of a sudden now, you get a great idea. You can do it in a week. You can do it in 2 weeks or a month. But one of the things that, when I say that, I've got to put a bit of a caveat with that, and you know this yourself, is this idea that you can just learn it in an afternoon and then take a week in your spare time and launch the next unicorn app is absolute nonsense. Anybody who's telling you they've done that ain't telling you the full truth. I don't know what you think about that one.
Yeah, do you know, it's funny because one of the appeals of no code was the speed at which things could be developed, or at least that what was promised on the tin. And I've kind of heard that there was like a steep learning curve depending on which platform you went with. You know, I heard there was a learning curve with Bubble, and there really was a learning curve. Like, it took me actually months to kind of get my head around the concept. And I remember one night, I think I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was actually talking in Bubble speak in my dreams. Do you know what I mean? When current user and all that kind of stuff. When it was no code and you thought, oh, you can do it quickly, I thought, oh, this is really good. And then when I started with Bubble, I was like, wow, there is a steep learning curve. You know, and when you're using no code tools like Canva, you know, where you literally just drag and drop and the image appears and you put some text in, you know, there's your flyer or there's your thing. It is literally that quick. But I've quickly realized that building an app is a completely different process. And whilst you may not be actually involved in writing code itself, you still have to learn how to think like a programmer. And you still have to learn or try to understand a lot of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes to make sense of the user interface and all the stuff you need to put in to make the database and stuff work. Even like, you know, database concepts, I had some experience with it when I was building out my app in FileMaker, but I had to learn how Bubble handles that particular part of the app building process, the back-end side of stuff, how workflows worked, you know, and all the kind of things that were unique to Bubble. And that took some time. In fact, I remember it was probably about In fact, I remember that this is a funny story for me, because I remember the first time I actually tried to build something in Bubble, I cried, literally real tears, because I was like, I've just done this program for like 6 weeks, and now I get to the part where I finally get to build, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, this is just staring at you like, well, what's
Yeah,
next? What's
yeah.
next?
And it was a real moment of frustration. I was like, this is not going to be easy. And then it was still another 3, 4, 5 months before I actually started to feel comfortable with understanding how to take something I was trying to create or trying to achieve in the Bubble world, and then kind of, put it together and make it work. And even then, I still felt like, an imposter pretty much every day, because it had been a long journey, but at the same time, I still didn't know everything that I needed to know in order to kind of make things work. So, yes, I agree with you. This whole idea of, no code is like really easy and simple and stuff like that. At least my experience of it was not that way.
Yeah. I think it's hyped up that like everybody could do it, and I'm not saying that in kind of like a patronizing way.
No.
It's just that, I mean, what do they say? Like 1% of people can write code to build apps.
Right.
Probably expand it maybe out to say 5, maybe even 10%. Like somebody who's really good at logical thinking, somebody who is really good on Excel and putting formulas together and stuff like that. Will be able to do it, but a lot of people just won't have the patience to sit down and learn it and then do it as well. So it's an easier solution, in fact, much easier. But to get the 5, 10, 20x speed that you would get over code, kind of, that's not going to happen to somebody who is new and is learning it. That's going to happen further on down the line. But and it's still, like you said, it's still a visual program. You still have to think in that kind of logical way. But having said that, I mean, we've had sessions where I've been helping you build your app, and we've done something, and you've gone, oh right, okay, right, that's done. I'm like, do you realize just how easy that to do compared to what we've had to do? And I said to you, honestly, you don't know you're born.
And that's and I always thought when you would say stuff like that, it would be interesting, because obviously we would have built this functionality in Bubble, and I think a lot of the stuff we did was on the back end workflows, and had some quite complicated logic there and stuff like that. And then it would work, after a few hours of us kind of figuring it out, and you'd be like, man, if you had to do that in the coding environment, that would have taken months to do. And I'm like, okay, cool, what's next?
But you're like, oh, right, okay. But you just expect it to work, don't you, at the end of the day? So just anybody that's watching, by the way, another big difference between me and Raf is the fact that we're both from England, as you can probably tell, but I'm North.
I'm from the true part of England, the South.
In East, South. So anywhere else in the world, it's not a concept that people get, but I think Game of Thrones kind of give people an essence of what it means to be North and South. So that's where I'm a Mancunian. There's people in England actually who like live way north, like Carlisle or Newcastle, who don't even consider for me to be a northerner, but I refute that absolutely. I'm a northerner, proud. So, but yeah, he's a general southern, what we call a southern softie, and I'm we're all a bit thick up north. Apparently, we're all stupid. So yeah, I'm a northern idiot sort of thing. So yeah, but he likes to take the mickey out of my accent sometimes. I don't reciprocate because I'm a gentleman. I'm that kind of fella. But,
lies.
When all of a sudden some southerners, you hear some weird accent coming out through the headphones, and you're like, he's just trying to take the mickey out of my accent. Like, all of a sudden he goes, yeah, that was lovely. Anyway, so that's just a little bit about us. Anyway, now then, let's discuss the elephant in the room when it comes to no code at the minute, and that is Bubble.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to sort of pull up. As everybody knows, there was a pricing change with Bubble back in early April, and to capture the mood. I mean, Eli's a great guy. He's nobody's lackey. You know what I mean? He'll say it. He'll tell you. He's no fanboy of anything. Although he's obviously a big Bubble guy, as we were. And Bubble is still great, whichever way, whatever's happened. But this number 3 point that he made in this tweet really just summed my feeling at this point about a week afterwards, when we'd started to look at the alternatives, because the thing felt so egregious what they'd done, and we started to look for alternatives. And that's this bubble feels more like a fond memory than the future of no code. He's got a cry face, which is also how I felt having spent years learning this thing. And I think to me that kind of summed it up. How about you?
Yes, me too. No, that's interesting for me. I think at this point, I remember I had just started using Bubble when they did the first pricing fiasco about 12 months prior to this. And I think literally I started using it, and maybe 4 weeks later they did this pricing and they said, oh, we've made a mistake. We're going to go away and do a consultation and kind of come back. And then obviously like 12 months or so later, this happened. And it was a real opportunity for me to kind of think about, okay, let me just look at what's going on. Obviously, I've invested a lot of time in learning Bubble and building my app. And in fact, I was just at the point where I was about to launch my app. I remember. The last few bits and pieces I had to put in place, and I was getting ready to launch. And there's a couple of things I didn't like about it. I didn't like, firstly, the way that the whole thing was handled. At the time it was announced as well, my app was workflow heavy. And I did some initial calculations based on what they suggested the rates would be, and it made my app like literally I wouldn't be able to afford to use it for my own company, let alone as a SaaS app. So that really just was pause for thought in a sense. And I was okay, as fantastic as this is, this doesn't bode well for the direction that I want to take this app in. But it also made me just kind of zoom out for a second. I thought, well, I'm actually in a situation where my entire tech stack is kind of invested in one company. So I would always be at the mercy of whatever does happen with Bubble, whether that's for good or maybe not so good, So I was like, okay, let me just take a week or so out. Let me just watch what's happening, kind of see what the reaction is, see how Bubble responds, and then use it as an opportunity to kind of see if there are other alternatives that, kind of might fit the bill. And what was really interesting, because I had my head in the Bubble rabbit hole for the past 12 months, I hadn't noticed a lot of the stuff that had been going on around Bubble. And there were some other entrants into the no-code market. For example, Xano had been around for a little while, but in the year or so that I'd been down the Bubble thing, their products had really seemed to mature. And it had a lot of functionality that was missing when I first looked at it before kind of jumping into Bubble. Yeah. And then there were other no-code tools that obviously had been around for a year longer. Some had kind of fallen by the wayside, but others had kind of, started to look a little bit more solid. And then I think I had come across Toddle a while before, but only in passing. And then I think you then reminded me that you had come across this company called Toddle. And then I think you then sent me a link at that time to check it out. Yeah. And I went to it and I thought, okay, this is interesting, so I kind of parked it for a while and thought, let me make a decision about this Bubble thing. To give them an opportunity to, figure out what they're actually going to do in response to the feedback. So I think they came back with their feedback, and for me, it still didn't feel like the right thing to commit the future of my app to.
Yeah, the future of you.
I think I definitely realized that I wanted to now decouple my stack. So I wanted my front end to be with one place and my back end with something else, just so that if this event happened again, I wouldn't be overexposed or have all my eggs in one basket. So that was a new requirement for me that I didn't have when I initially started with Bubble. And I think for me as well, like on a personal level, Bubble was pretty much able to do everything I needed to do. I now realize that there were so many layers of abstraction away from the code that I was learning programming in a very Bubble kind of way. And that was something that having switched to Toddle, I've had to kind of unlearn that, and that learn things which are actually more congruent with app development anyway, which is, I think, has been really good. But I think Bubble was still fantastic, and I wasn't stepping away from Bubble because it wasn't able to do the job that I wanted it to do. It's just I was now uncomfortable with this pricing scenario having happened in a really short period of time, and then now having everything invested in one platform. I just didn't want to be in a position where I'm kind of held to ransom in the future, particularly then developing a multi-tenant SaaS app where potentially I have other clients now that are affected by the decisions that are being made, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't know how you found it.
Yeah, it was just, for me, it was back in that last pricing change in March 2022, where they were going to charge you per database record that you stored. and they rolled back on it because there was such a furore about it.
Mm.
And it was just the wording that was coming out of Bubble at the time really reassured me.
Mm.
And it was all like, look, we know we made a mistake. We should have consulted you first. We should have consulted the wider community, all of this type of thing. And I remember I went on, and I remember one post I put on the forum. There's one guy who was like, almost like, I don't know where he's from in the world, but he's like, I can't feed my family if they do this, blah, blah, blah. And I really sort of, I might need to learn code and everything. And I kind of talked him down, because to me, unless you want to be a programmer, don't learn code. Okay. And this guy had an app, it was a production app in Bubble. And he was thinking the only way out of this, because just like you say, in that year since, things have come along so much. But at the time, there wasn't. I mean, people were talking about Wappler, which, okay, fair enough. If you want to go and use it. But it isn't no code. It's very much low code. So the high barriers to entry for that. And I remember saying to this guy, look, stick with Bubble. Let's trust them. And because if you shift now, go and lose code, you're going to lose so much time that you could be doing with this. And when it came round, and all of a sudden, bang out of the blue, we got an email saying we changed the pricing and this is what it's going to be. First and foremost, even before I realized just what was going on, I was shocked that we hadn't had that consultation that we were promised.
Mm-hmm.
And that immediately broke trust with me. Mm-hmm. They made a mistake last year. They cocked it up big time. And to be fair to them, they'd rolled it back. But they promised that they would listen. And what appeared to happen, I don't know behind the scenes, what appeared to happen is that they asked a few people who were like the kind of the Bubble insiders type thing, and got their opinion on it. And that upset me. Mm. And the other thing as well, because you remember it on the Bubble, the forum post, within minutes of them posting about this price change, there was other people who had all the diagrams, all the explanations, accompanying videos. And like, these people have been inside and they know what's going on. So they've let it rip to a few people and let the rest of us in the dark. Yeah, and as you know, initially they had the algorithm wrong. So it was really looking egregious when they first did it. Yeah. But the other thing as well is the way it was done. It was Easter Thursday. It was like about 4:00 UK time on an Easter Thursday, which okay in the States is about 11. But most people are getting ready for the long weekend. And then they just dropped it and went quiet, and nobody come out. And then they rolled out a marketing person who'd never been on the forum before. And it took about 5 days before this. And it was just like, they've learned nothing from last year. And then they doubled down on it. And okay, they made a change to the algorithm. And the thing is, Raf, is that, and to everybody that's watching as well, is everybody knew that we were getting a great deal with Bubble, with the old pricing. We knew we were, right? And we're not stupid. We knew the price had to go up. And we knew that when people scaled, that's when kind of the prices should scale with it. There's no problem with that. What you're looking for is predictability. What you're looking for is that if I've got so many users, we so much throughput, so much bandwidth, etc., I can expect that this is going to be the cost roughly against the app. Price predictability is just, and that's what killed it, along with those other things which really shook my trust in them. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't know what's going on at Bubble. They took the money, the VC money and everything, and it just seems very, very corporate, like they're just not listening to their customers. And that change has happened very fast. I mean, I was in Bubble, first of all, in 2019, and there was still the odd question in the forum that get answered by Emmanuel and Josh every now and again. It just felt like really good at the time. But it just seemed like they weren't really going to listen to their customers. And at that point, kind of, I realized I'm going to have to look somewhere else. Now, the plan was originally just to move the back end, so I'm not going to be subject to those workflow units. And by the way, all of this is just mine and Raf's opinions. If you've got different ones and it works for you and everything, no one's knocking that. It's just what our experience was. I just found, just like you say, I had all my eggs in this one basket, and these people were just prepared to just do this to us on a whim. That's how I felt about it. But originally, I was just going to move my back end onto Xano. That was my original plan, and stick with my front end in Bubble. So I did that. And then Toddle came along, obviously. And Toddle, like I remember mentioning it to you, I'd known about it for about 6 months before, but they'd released very, very limited private beta that I wasn't part of initially. And, when we got our hands on the private beta, we were like, don't know how we're meant to use this, but just something about it feels extreme. I feel like you've got something like really powerful in your hands, but you don't know what the hell it is or how you're going to use it. But just that sense. And so kind of we kind of tentatively played around with Toddle for a bit, and then sort of before we went all in with it. But yeah, just sticking with Bubble is, Bubble is fantastic. It's pioneering in what it's done, and they're going to continue to pioneer. They're still by far and away the biggest player, got the biggest user base. You can't dismiss it by any means. For me, though, I think if you're going to, one of my other issues with Bubble, I'm sorry to go on about this, but is the database. And it always has been. Is I'm used to working with relational databases, SQL databases. Bubble is not that. And the hoops you've got to jump through to get it to build a real relational database is pretty frightening. In fact, I've done videos and videos and videos on it, all of which with a relational database would be completely unnecessary. And so in a way, it was kind of the fact that Bubble was no longer, I could use it as a back end, was actually quite freeing, because then I could find a no-code version of a SQL database, which is Xano, and there are other things that have come out since that look really good, that enables you to do that. But the database for me was always going to be a problem with scalability and building that relational database. Is all of the, I developed like lots of different types of data types just to try and make it fit. I'd there was things like from Peter Amelie's book and stuff, but there's also stuff that I'd come out with myself, like the shuttle data type, and there was all the different things just to make this thing work, and we were so in love with the tool that it was like we didn't care. It was just so brilliant, that we just wanted to use it.
For me though, I kind of see, rather than looking at the pricing thing as a negative thing, I actually see it as a real positive, because I think Bubble is so powerful that any shortcomings, there was always a workaround. And so it was, in that sense, it's absolutely fantastic. But it was the pricing thing that made me realize, hang on a sec, there are other platforms where you don't need to do the workarounds, because these newer platforms are built on newer technology, whereas obviously Bubble's been around for 10 years, and even like I think the other day they released a new feature, and it was still within the Bubble framework, so it isn't quite what it promises to be, because there are so many limitations just by virtue of the fact that the technology is a lot older, or the whole infrastructure of the Bubble platform. So if anything, I was like glad that it happened, because I was like, okay, I was just about to launch, let me just pause for a second, let me just see. And I was like, wow, there's this whole other world that has kind of like sprung up around the Bubble ecosystem, so to speak. And that's where Toddle was really refreshing. And I remember when I jumped into Toddle as well, I remember looking at that template page that comes up, when you first open a project, and I was like, okay, what now? But once you get over that, and again, just in the interest of being, in a full disclosure, there is a learning curve as well. Do you know what I mean? Like I think there would be for any, serious no-code tool. I'd also in that time looked at Flutterflow and started to do some stuff with Flutterflow, because I knew I wanted to have a native mobile app, and actually contemplated parking the Bubble app or the web app for a period of time, and actually doing the mobile app first with a backend like Xano, and then coming back once the whole Bubble thing had kind of settled. So I went into Flutterflow, and with Flutterflow as well, there is a learning curve. You have to understand what their framework is, how it works, how you do the back end stuff, the front end stuff, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that goes without saying. But what's really interesting is by jumping into Toddle as well, because Toddle is built on web standards, a little HTML knowledge, a little CSS knowledge will take you a long way. But there aren't the levels of abstraction there that I now realize there was in Bubble, because you are much closer to the source of everything happening. Now, that might sometimes require one or two more steps in the process as you're building out UI or something like that. But that's because it's giving you the power and the real flexibility to really create absolutely anything. I mean, even you could talk more to this as well. Their web component, or the component functionality of the platform itself is, I haven't really seen any other no-code tool have it developed to that point. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the things is obviously you work with reusables in Bubble, and they're not components, but kind of they're there, and when you work with them, and that's great. Like you say, we're used to finding ways around stuff. And actually, I was getting into WeWeb. That was kind of because Toddle wasn't even in public beta at the time, so I couldn't really jump into that. So I was looking at WeWeb, and I really like WeWeb. I've got to be honest with you. Anybody that's chosen it has chosen a really good front end builder. I really enjoyed working with it. But it didn't have, not only did it not have components at the time, I don't know if things have changed, it didn't even have the concept of a reusable element. So that kind of got me thinking, maybe not. But I saw a video by one of the guys at WeWeb on YouTube, and he showed this whole component system that I was like, wow, wow, wow. And they said, but it's going to be a while yet, and this is just a Figma mock-up. And that kind of deflated me. And then I think then Toddle, within a week of that, did a video about their new builder that was just coming into public beta. And we had access to the private beta at the time. And it showed this whole component system that was similar to what WeWeb was showing, but just perfect. And I was just like, this is it. This is the way things have to go. And I got really excited then. But still, you know, I remember you saying to me, "Is Toddle ready?" And I'm like that. He's not quite there yet. He's not quite there. He's brilliant, but he's not quite there yet. But I mean, in terms of web components, you can see exactly what they've done because they're so aligned with web standards. Is that if you can't, the great thing about Toddle is that, and again, we're not just here to talk about Toddle, but with Toddle is that no matter what you're doing, you can go and find some documentation somewhere that will tell you how this thing is meant to work because it's sat directly. In other words, you've got your JavaScript, you've got HTML, you've got your CSS layer. And basically Toddle is giving you quite a thin layer above that, even though it's very functional. Whereas like Bubble is giving you this whole mammoth abstraction layer that they've really tried to build to try and protect non-techies from what is really going on. And unfortunately, there's a thing in programming called the law of leaky abstractions. And it basically means is that abstractions will always leak. Basically, at some point, you've got to, you know, at some point you find yourself doing some custom CSS in Bubble. At some point, a little bit of, even if it's just a little bit of copy and paste from Stack Overflow that you've done JavaScript or whatever. So the abstractions, and they necessarily have to do in the case of Bubble, it has to. Whereas Toddler completely embrace that we're very close to the metal, and therefore we're not trying to create like an abstraction. We're trying to make it so that purposefully that abstraction leaks, but we're going to give you 90% of what you need. And by the way, I don't want that to mean then that it's not a no-code. It definitely is no-code solution. In just the last few days, I've done some amazing things that I couldn't believe that I could do just using Toddle formulas. There was one tool that we did look at originally right after Bubble when we sort of said we maybe need to look at other things. That is more of a low-code tool that actually looked really interesting. That was Noodle. It seems a million miles away now, but I spent a good week on that and absolutely loved it. But it was just, I was coming across brick walls everywhere where I had to dive into code. And I know that they've been working on stuff. You had a bit of a go with Noodle. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I loved it as well. But again, because I'm coming from a non-tech background, I started to realize that the deficiency or the disadvantage of that being my starting point, because I think even now, like, because you have a coding background, you might look at something in Toddle or Noodle and it makes complete sense to you. Like, for example, one of the big changes in using Toddle is this whole idea of variables. You know, now obviously in Bubble it's kind of like custom states, but kind of like again it's the Bubble version of variables, and that was something I had to figure out. Firstly, what is this, and then how do I use it? Why would I even need it, and stuff like that. And when I was looking at Noodle, it was that, but 10 times that, because I was having to kind of get my head around how their nodes work and all that kind of stuff. But that said, I loved it. I just didn't feel at that point in time it was going to be the right tool for what I needed to do based on my experience and and the resources that were available to kind of learn the platform, you know. And like I said before, you know, I think you have to realize that there will be an inherent learning curve if you're going to work with anything that has the power to really pull off what you want it to pull off. You know, and I think that just goes with the territory, but provided you're willing to kind of do that, then I think, you know, it can pay huge dividends. And
there's one other tool I do want to mention actually, because kind of the two tools that I was really into in no code have kind of gone by the way. Well, they've not gone by the way as far as I'm concerned. They've gone by the wayside. And the other one is AppGyver. No, you've not really looked at that, but this was from very early days, and I absolutely loved AppGyver. Yeah, it was a little bit buggy. Yeah, it wasn't great in some aspects, but in what it did really well, it was. I mean, it had these logic flows that actually remind me a little bit of Toddle. These logic flows where you could sort of, I mean, it was just the way that you could just drop different action steps and then just draw lines. It was like Bubble should have this, Bubble, it should have AppGyver's work logic flows in there. But unfortunately, SAP bought them about, I think, early 2021. And AppGyver was free to the community. And then if you got above, if you in a company that had more than $10 million in revenue, then they charged, and apparently it was quite expensive from that point. But to the community, it was free, which was great, and SAP have continued that. They've renamed it. It's not called AppGyver anymore. It's called SAP Build Apps or something. But what they've done is they've gone away and they've sort of left the community edition where it is, not really developed it, and then gone and sort of developed like the proper SAP version that's meant to for SAP users, and really gone with that. So even though it's still there and it's not gone anywhere specifically, it's fallen so far behind the likes of Flutterflow now. I think that's a real shame. I mean, I know I'm probably the only one that grieves for it. There didn't seem to be too many people who really found it useful. But I mean, I absolutely, I should qualify for building mobile apps.
Right.
But what you could do when I was sort of into Bubble was you could easily use Bubble's API, Bubble's data API. So you could have a Bubble backend, a Bubble web front end, and you could have an AppGyver mobile front end. So obviously that's gone. But I wanted to just mention AppGyver because I was
honorable mention.
An honorable mention. Just, it's not dead yet. There's still people using it, but it's. If you start from scratch and you've got another alternative, I mean, I've not really played with Flutterflow too much, whereas you have. I mean, what are your thoughts on Flutterflow?
I love it, and I think, and obviously with Toddle or with Bubble, you can build apps that feel like they're native apps on mobile phones, but you are logging into a website effectively. But you can work with a responsive engine to make it look and feel like a mobile app, which is fantastic. But with Flutterflow, obviously, it's a native mobile app, so it will work on Androids and iPhones. And one of the big distinctions as well with that is if ever you go offline, it can then use your data to access the app. And for my particular use case, that's one of the really important to have that kind of functionality. So, and what was really good as well is that, again, now a lot of the terminology in Flutterflow, because it is based on Flutter and Dart as the programming language, is very similar to what I'm now discovering in Toddle. But it's very dissimilar from what was in Bubble.
Right.
Like I said, Bubble's way of naming things and terming things was designed to make it as accessible as possible for citizen no coder. But then once you kind of get past a certain point, it all becomes irrelevant, so to speak. Whereas with these other things, like I said, they're much closer to the metal in terms of things. So, for example, in Bubble, things are called lists. In Toddle and Flutterflow, they're called arrays. Because in programming, a list is called an array. Just stick to little things like that. But once you kind of get your head around that, it's really good. And then jumping between the two now is a lot easier because it's the same terminology, it's the same concepts, just applied in a slightly different way because one's a mobile app and one's a web app. But that kind of cuts down the learning curve a little bit because it's a bit more familiar.
But what about one of the things that put me off a little bit that I heard of, and I didn't really play with it to find out, but the compilation time, it has to compile it into the Flutter framework and into Dart, and that's after every change. So sometimes that process can take a while, which reminds me of the old days when we used to have to compile our code, and every little change we'd be waiting a minute for it to compile. It kind of reminds me of that. So how did you find that?
Well, I think again, because I don't have any other reference points,
right,
I just accepted it as this is the way it is. And I remember when you have to compile it, it takes maybe a minute 30 seconds at tops, and then that live version, I think it stays live for like 10 or 12 minutes, but you can still preview it without all of the functionality, and that's instantaneous. So again, it's just a
Right.
slightly different way that you're working with stuff, but
Right.
get used to it. It's just a feature or a
Yeah.
quirk of that particular, design system or platform and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't find it restrictive at all. You just get used to it.
Right. So
Kind
so
of.
you can preview the app.
Yeah, you can
without full
preview it,
compilation,
yeah,
right?
but it doesn't have all of the functionality as when you kind of like publish it in order
Right.
to have the full thing. But yeah, it's fine. I found it, in fact, so much so that I would use the preview more often than actually doing the whole live rendering, because I didn't need it often. So
Okay, fair enough. What about because they're trying to make it applicable to the web? Have you done any work with that?
yeah, I was tempted. I was tempted to actually, in fact, that was my last decision before jumping to Total. I was tempted to use their web browser version, because now they support making web apps on the same platform, which would have been fantastic, because it would have meant everything's in one place. I'm only designing things once. However, the initial consensus seems to be that the web browser version isn't as fast as it could be, and I guess it depends on what type of web app you're kind of building and stuff. So I heard quite a few comments around that. And again, what I wanted to do was I just wanted to be in a situation where I didn't have everything in one basket. So I was like, I want to do Toddle for my web app front end, keep this for the native mobile app, of which it seems to be one of the leading kind of like solution providers, and keep the back end somewhere else. So that was what kind of swayed me. I would have been willing to kind of try it out at the very least and get my MVP done that way, just to see how fast it was. But I thought, I've been there and done that with Toddle, with Bubble. I know there were some other ones as well. Like, I think, is it Defeatio?
Did Sophie, was it?
Sorry.
This is kind of a little bit of an in joke, because we couldn't pronounce the name of these things. I mean that's another thing as well. Why they come up with some better names, guys? But Ditify, which Raf couldn't say, so he called it Defeato. And in the end, we settled on Profiterole, didn't we? Just to make it a bit easy to talk about. But that's
go on. There you
go. But that's like an all-in-one. So, and I think with Bitify, sorry, honestly, it's a brilliant system. The two guys are English guys as well. Worked really hard to build this. Two brothers have worked really hard, and I think they're doing quite well with it. But it is an all-in-one system, and I think what they've fallen, I think they thought that they could maybe, because I know they had some insider information. I won't say where I got that from, but there was some insider information that they knew that this pricing thing was going to go off. And I think they're hoping to grab a lot of the old bubble users. But what they kind of miss with that is that one of the, just like you said, all your eggs in one basket, is that we didn't want to jump from that into another all-in-one system. Even though with Ditify that you could export the code back end and front end and the database and everything, was that people didn't want to jump, and so I don't think it's gained a huge amount of momentum from the bubble pricing thing. From what I've seen of it, it looks really good. But again, I was just determined, just like you, not to stick with an all-in-one system.
Also, I don't think it offered a trial as well, did it? I think you had to kind of like subscribe from the off.
I think
so. That was a bit of a barrier for me, because like I said, because my probably my biggest hurdle was everything in one place. It looks fantastic. I went and watched a whole bunch of the tutorials on it, and I was like, oh my gosh! Like, if I had found this a year ago, I would have been more than happy to make that, my solution. So they've obviously done a fantastic job. But for me, on the back of the bubble experience, it was just, like I said, trying to decouple the whole stack so that everything is in one basket, just to kind of make sure I've got an insurance moving forward. Should one thing change, at least then I might only have to change one part of, my stack, rather than, having to change everything else.
And it's,
and apologies for the name mispronunciation. It's all on me. Sorry.
It's just an in-joke. You don't mean no disrespect by any means.
No.
Fantastic system, no doubt. And there are some in the community who absolutely love it.
And that said, sorry, Gav, just before we carry on, and that said as well, there might be people that are in the position where they don't want something that's decoupled, or they don't want a back end in a separate. They want to have to learn Xano and Toddle and stuff. Then I think Bubble or Titofi or companies like that, they offer really credible and powerful solutions, because like I said, that just might not be what their experience is. And I think that's totally fine too. It's just on the right fit, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people who are sticking with Bubble and are defending it to the hilt, I completely get where they're coming from, because I was in their shoes. This sounds 12 months ago. I was in their shoes. There was people saying, what about this? What about that? And I'd immediately jump on the forum and go, no way, Bubble is fantastic. I think what I've discovered is that I remember putting a post when it was all going off, was like, I'm, kind of that I was going to do this and do that. And I remember saying, I'm sorry, Bubble, but you made me look. It's kind of like, and once you've seen what else is out there, you realize that Bubble is great as an all-in-one solution. And in fact, it's an amazing tool. I don't want to get anybody feel like as though we're dissing on Bubble at all, because we're not. We love it. No, I spent nearly 4 years with it, and maybe 2 years like full time, and a couple of years before that, like where I was dipping in and out a lot. And it really is a very, very special tool. But I don't think in any area, I think you'd be hard pressed to say with the tools that are out there now, I don't think there's any area where, any single area where you can say that Bubble is best in class. And I don't, definitely for the back end, absolutely for the back end, but also the front end as well. I think that there are better tools out there. And I think that once I'd moved my back end out of Bubble into Xano, it wasn't such as, and then I was working with, by the way, big up to Eli and Jared's Xano connector plugin. Amazing. I mean, it really was fantastic. But once although Bubble still made it awkward for you to try and work with something else. But luckily the plugin kind of covered that. But once you've done that, it's not a million miles away to then move the front end as well, and especially when you feel like you've got a good tool. I don't think I probably would have. I looked at WeWeb for a while, looked at Noodle. I don't think I would have moved it to either of those. It was only because Toddle came along that I felt I had a better answer, even though it was early days. And we're making a big bet on this thing because we don't know how it's going to go, but the guys at Toddle are very, very involved. And they give you a lot of confidence. I don't know about what you think about that.
Yeah, and again, coming from a non-tech background, I'm not afraid to ask the stupid question, because I'd rather look stupid than be stupid.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And I think, even, on the Toddle forum, the Discord is where all of the activity happens. They're just so willing to engage, to help. Also some of the other, users in there as well. And I think that's really important. I think, probably the next steps as they're kind of building out the platform will be for there to be some type of a trail left for people coming in. And I think you've tried to address that, so if you're coming from say the Bubble world, how does the functionality in Toddle kind of correlate with what you're used to, so you can kind of get going? I've tried to approach it from a slightly different perspective. Someone who's starting from scratch and maybe is coming from a non-tech background, if you wanted to start to build that in Toddle, what can you do? Because the thing is incredibly powerful, but and it's done in such a way that you don't feel overwhelmed by it. There's the initial, like, what do I do? But once you get working with it, you don't feel overwhelmed by it, because you don't realize how powerful it could really be. Do you know what I mean? And I think they've got this really great balance between just enough level of abstraction so it's accessible for a non-tech guy like me, whilst also being seriously powerful, that if you need to build something that has some incredible functionality, it is there, with the caveat that we're dealing with front end and the logic that makes the front end work, and obviously back end has to be something else, So but that's been my experience, and I think that the founders are really engaging. I think their approach to development is quite fun as well, and quite lighthearted. And the community is fantastic, and for me it's just been a positive experience. Do you know what I mean? Particularly where I'm in my journey,
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that you find out that they've built the editor in Toddle, there must be kind of like, I mean, we've talked about this. We'd love to get Andreas or Casper, or maybe both of them on the podcast, and we can have a chat with them. Fortunately, the community is small enough, and we kind of been in there, I wouldn't say from day one, but pretty early doors, that maybe we have enough clout for them to agree to that. We will see. But that would be fantastic. But I think what they've done is they've built an underlying platform, and then just started to build things in that platform to the point where it was almost like not self-building, but that it could build it within itself, the whole thing, which is pretty impressive, actually. I
think that's a great way to show off the power of something. If you're willing to launch a feature and you build that feature in the very platform that you're going to launch the feature in, I think that says a lot about how invested you are and how confident you are in the product or the platform you created. Because I know there are other companies that might do stuff and use, I don't know, Google Forms instead of their own.
Well, I mean, it's I was just going to say it's they put the money where their mouth is with it, haven't they? Really, and it's kind of like, well, if we can do it, then you can do it, and so that gives you a lot of confidence. Now then, let's come to this one again. I don't want to sound like this whole episode is just us beating on Bubble, because we got a lot of time and respect for it. But this was something, I mean, but we are here to talk all things no code, things that come up in the no code space, etc. So I just wanted to share my screen again and just I'll tell you what. Right. So it's from JJ, who's obviously very well known in the Bubble community. And now JJ has not had Eli real about what's been going on with the pricing change. JJ is very, very staunch, very much a Bubble loyalist, shall we say. But even he come up with this. I now know why Bubble didn't build their certification process in Bubble. They didn't want to work in a buggy editor. Well, it's kind of like kicking them in both legs with one kick sort of thing with that one. By the way, I like this. This was Andreas Moller. He's not posted that reply as Toddle. He's done it as himself, but that's one of the fans of Toddle that's done this reply to that one.
Oh, I didn't realise that him. Funny.
So, what's your take on that one, Ralph?
Well, I think it says it all, really, doesn't it? And you know what? Like you said, when you kind of began this point, I think Bubble is fantastic, and it does what it does. Do you know what I mean? So it's for me, it's just a case of I'm entirely grateful for my entire Bubble experience. Everything I learned is my first foray into, other than FileMaker, like building up my own app and learning all that kind of stuff in. And I've got nothing but fond memories of it, if that makes sense. For me, everything's moved on now. You know what I mean? And I feel like I'm working in something that is current, that is responsive. It's moving, even in Toddle right now, they're almost pushing updates daily to the platform, and you just feel like you're a part of this thing that is right on the cutting edge of what no code is going to be. Do you know what I mean? And I'm really grateful for Bubble, but also really excited about all the other options that have opened up as well.
Yeah.
You like my
the question as a real politician's answer that one, Ralph. I won't be so diplomatic. No, at the end of the day, to me, what were they thinking? I mean, what the optics of that certification program, and they haven't built that tool in their own system when they're telling everybody else to build it. I'm going off what JJ's saying there, and it could be wrong. I'm assuming it's right because he seems to have the inside track. But to me, the optics of that alone, even if you could build it in, I mean, number one, to admit if it was, well, we could build it faster in that, well, that's not good. There's no good outcome with that, okay? Because the minute it gets found out, people are going to say, well, you can't build your own tools in it. Why should you expect anybody else? Now, I may be being unfair, and maybe I've not got the full story with that one, but if that is on face value, that's definitely what it looks like to me. But then obviously he kicks them again by saying, it's a buggy editor sort of thing. And I believe that they have problems in the editor in the last week where it's been really, really slow. I've got to be honest with you, in the time I was working with Bubble, I very, very rarely found anything. It could get a bit slow at times, but generally speaking, it's like, honestly, I've got nothing but good things to say about Bubble in terms of it as a tool. I like you said, I loved every minute of working with it. It was fantastic. But at the end of the day, there are now other options out there as well. And I think that it's good for the industry because this market is going to be huge. It's growing and growing and growing. I mean, when I first went to Bubble, and we're only going back to like 2019, I think they had like less than 500,000 users. There was barely any YouTube videos, only kind of Gabby and I think Greg who were doing videos, which is why I started doing them, because there was there wasn't that much out there, and I just thought I've picked this up, I can show it off, just it wasn't entirely altruistic. I was showing off a little bit.
Look what I can do. Look what I can do.
Yeah. Look, I've worked this one out now. But no, seriously, so it's grown massively so quick. And it's only right that as that market grows, that there's other contenders in there to match up to it. I don't think they should have it all their own way. Competition is great for everybody, especially for the likes of me and you. But at the end of the day, it's just interesting that JJ, who has never said a bad word about Bubble at all, suddenly comes out and says that, whereas Eli, he will say. But just going back to what you did say before, is like, now we've moved on and the modern things, it just underlines what Eli said, which I couldn't agree with more, is that now seems more like a fond memory than the future of no code. And
I think one of the challenges that Bubble will probably have, if or having or may have, is they need to navigate the danger of becoming the Facebook of the no code space. You know what I mean? Because you kind of get to that stage. It's a real possibility. There are guys.
The MySpace.
Sorry, the MySpace of sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, MySpace of the no code space, because the Facebooks come up, the Twitters come up, the Instagrams come up, which take that concept and break it down into a more manageable chunk, and then really refine it and then become best in class at that. And then it's really easy when you become that jack of all trades to actually really be a master of none. And some of the new entrants can really provide more bang for buck. So
I think as well, as we go forward, though, I think some of the others will start to face a similar sort of problems. Bubble's been around, and I think they'll all come across that in the future. I mean, Bubble can't move that quick because they've got so many users on there that they can't move too quick. But as we've seen, when they release stuff, there's bugs in it, and it causes havoc with a lot of users and all of their users. Whereas kind of early users like you, they can afford to kind of just bang new features out, developing very quickly, and not really affect anybody. I mean, but even I mean, I don't know how many users Toddler's got now, but it's only in the low thousands. So at the end of the day, they can move that quick, and there's maybe the same with the others, the WeWeb. But so at the end of the day, they have that. What's the phrase? The newcomers kind of initiative that they can go. They can be on the attack all of the time. You frozen up there, Raph?
Oh, can you see me? Am I unfrozen? Am I unfrozen?
You are unfrozen.
Okay.
Let it go. Let it go, Raph. I was going to say, right, let's just talk about briefly, because I know we've been going on a while, but me and Raph can talk about this stuff for having a day. What about back end stuff? Some of the back end things that are going on at the minute. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So when I first got involved with Bubble, I actually wanted to build the back end in Xano. And I remember having a conversation with someone about it, and they advised me not to kind of keep everything in Bubble, because that was the beauty of Bubble. Everything's in one place. And I realized if I'd maybe done that, maybe I wouldn't be in the position that I found myself in, where everything was like in one basket. So I've kind of got my feet wet in Xano. It is an incredibly powerful platform. Again, no code, so you're not kind of dealing with all that kind of stuff. But during this little time I was reevaluating stuff, I also went and jumped on my good old friend Udemy and did a couple of SQL courses, and I absolutely loved SQL. Again, at your recommendation, I might add. I've lost a lot of time listening to you, actually, come to think of it. But that said, I went into SQL, and then when I went to experiment with Flutterflow, I actually connected it to Supabase as the back end. I loved it. Absolutely love the way Supabase works as a relational database. The queries make sense to me. Again, coming from a non-tech perspective, I can kind of understand what's going on. And now as well with ChatGPT, if you're writing a SQL database or you need to write queries for a SQL database, it's a lot easier. It's like having a tutor or a mentor in your back pocket, and you can say, this is what I need to do and all that kind of stuff. So I still have a real fondness for Supabase. However, at the moment with Toddle, there needs to be some kind of intermediary that kind of connects. I mean, I could connect directly to Supabase, but in terms of the workflows that might need to take place and stuff between the front end and Supabase, there need to be like another piece to the puzzle. And there are companies like FastGen that kind of fill that gap, as well as that's it, Comnoco, They kind of fill that gap between the front end and the back end. So at this stage, it would require me learning another platform in order to be able to kind of connect the back end. And I'll be honest with you, the jury's still out for me, because there is something really appealing about the whole use of ChatGPT and AI, because some of the ideas I have for some of the other apps are in that direction. And I'd like to get my toes kind of wet, integrating some of the LangChain models in my app and stuff. So yeah, but in terms of the whole backend stuff, for me, it's a 2-horse race between Supabase and Xano. And because Xano has a really generous free plan as well, you can kind of get started with Xano, and kind of build everything out and make sure everything's working before you kind of flip over to the paid plan, which gives you a little bit more functionality and a little bit, some more options. So yeah, but between those two, those seems to be the ones that definitely kind of like, leading that charge.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at, like, if you want to build an app, even if you want to build your front end in Bubble, or you want to build it in Toddle, or even if you want to build it in WeWeb, if you want to go with Xano at the back end or Supabase, you can develop for free these days. And I think that's fantastic, that it's open to anybody. If you want to have a go, you want to dip your toes in the water, it's, there's no kind of paywall with all this lot. And I think that's one of the great things about no code, really. Yeah, okay, if you build an app and you publish it and you want it to start marketing it, obviously you're going to have to pay for it. But yeah, I mean, the only thing with, like I say, with Bubble is in terms of, if you're going to use their back end, then you're quickly going to find that you're going to have to start paying for it. I mean, the only kind of thing that I would say with Bubble is, if you're going to use it as an all-in-one system, if you're just building a really, really basic MVP or a proof of concept and you just need to get it done quick, then yeah, go all in with Bubble. But I would say, and I know there's, depending on who watches this, there's going to be people who will say that's a lot of rubbish. Like, there was I saw an app that had just hit 10 million revenue, and that was scaling all in one on Bubble. Fair enough, but what's its database doing? I'm not calling it or anything. I'm just saying, to what extent is its database doing that, and how much is it actually costing them to run that? And if they're doing that kind of revenue, the chances are they're on the dedicated plan, which means you're not paying based on their workload system. Okay, so once you get to that level, you don't pay the workload system, which obviously we all hope, we would have all have hoped to have gotten at some point. I mean, one of the other things, well, with Xano as a backend and with Supabase, is that both of them allow you to host your data and your backend API somewhere else where you want to. Bubble, that was always one of the things with Bubble that was a little bit kind of, you had no choice about that unless you were going to go on the dedicated plan.
GDPR, that's obviously really important, if you're kind of going that direction. And I think as well, Supabase have just added, all those certifications you need to run health apps.
Oh yeah,
part or something. I forget what the terminology is.
HIPAA.
That's it, yeah, and something else, yeah. So they've added all of that now as well, which obviously gives you a lot more.
I mean, Xano do that, but I think you've got to be on a higher tier plan to do that. But it's not massively expensive. I think with Xano is the fact you can write queries like you would write a SQL query, but do it in no code. It's a massive advantage. Like, we had a demo of no code a few weeks ago, and you know what? It looks amazing. I mean, the chap that we spoke to, Stuart, he'd obviously put his heart and soul into this thing, and he kind of to explain it. It's not a database and it's not a front end. It is purely like what you were talking about before, that if you're going to use Supabase as your back end, you need something in between that as like your API. Well, that's what Comnoco is. And I think FastGen is a similar sort of thing, although from what I can gather, FastGen is more high level, maybe something. I mean, Comnoco looked like a serious piece of kit. It looked like it would be something that you'd have to get into. Again, an English guy who's developed that, and that looks really good. What was your take on that when you saw?
Yeah, same thing. I thought it was, again, it looked so powerful, and I think at the time, I think I was just about to make the decision to kind of jump into Toddle, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to learn this now. So I was like, how much bandwidth do I have? Kind of, learn Toddle and learn Xano, because even with Comnoco, if you do that, then you're still having to learn Supabase. So it's like having to learn 3 different things. And I think once you've got through the learning curve, it's fine. The execution stuff is really quick. But it's just figuring out where everything is, what it does, how to make it do what you want it to do, and how to get everything to kind of, talk to each other. in real time, I think is where the real learning is. But like now, even in toddler, like I remember my first few times in toddler, I was like, wow, this is, I don't know what to do. When I do it, I can't make it do what I want it to do. And then, you kind of get used to the way things are, and then all of a sudden it just kind of goes really quickly, So
it's like anything else, the learning curve. And then, I mean, you used to say in programming, kind of it take you 2 weeks to learn a programming language, about 5 years to master it. Now, obviously, it's not like that in no code, but it will take you a couple of days to learn it, but maybe months to master it. And I think that's exactly how it is. Anyway, listen, we'll be going long enough. I'm sure people are getting a bit fed up with us waddling on about our favourite subject of no code stuff. We could talk for hours on this one. But yeah, so that's kind of like the first episode. I hope like you've enjoyed that. Me and Raf talking. We'll be having another episode whenever we can get together and we get the time. And hopefully we can bring 1 or 2 guests on as well. Depends on how much clout we've got in the no-code space, which is not a great deal.
We're about to find out.
We are about to find out.
If episode 2 is in 8 months' time, we know why.
In 8 months' time, when we've got some 19-year-old who's just published his own little, then you know. But no, there'll be more tutorials coming on the channel as well. There's a good chance that we'll start a channel just for this podcast. If it takes off, if we keep doing it and people like it and whatever, we'll do its own channel and whatever. And then Raf's going to do lots more tutorials on Flutter Flow, aren't you, Raf?
Yeah,
he doesn't know that. I've just told him.
I'm doing more Flutter Flow tutorials. Tunnel one's first, though. Tunnel's coming first.
Good stuff. All right, well, nice chatting. Hope you've enjoyed this. Hopefully we'll come back with more episodes and we will see you again shortly. Take it easy, Raf.
Yeah, speak to you soon.
See you now. Well, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
That was all right, wasn't it?